Okay. So have you ever thought about, like, what it would be like to never get old?
I mean, who hasn't? Right. It's like the ultimate human
Yeah,
fantasy.
exactly. And you think, oh, that's got to be something way out there, like science fiction.
Yeah.
But get this, we're not alone in thinking about this.
Oh.
There's this creature, a jellyfish, and it's tiny, like seriously smaller than your fingernail.
Wow.
That seems to have found a way to, like, actually do it. Not be old.
A jellyfish. Really? That's wild.
I know, right? It's called Turritopsis Dohrnii, and people call it the immortal jellyfish.
Okay, the immortal jellyfish.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued already.
It's like only about 4.5 millimeters in size, but here's the thing. It's found all over the world.
That is interesting. So it's not like tucked away in some remote corner of the ocean. It's everywhere.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And that just makes this whole thing even more mind-blowing.
Right. You'd think something with that kind of ability would be super rare.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So for this deep dive, we're going to explore what makes this little guy so special.
Yeah. And what it could mean for us humans, in terms of aging and maybe even, I don't know, extending our own lifespans.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're not going to get bogged down in the super technical stuff, though.
Right. We want to make sure this is understandable.
Yeah, we want to find those, like, really cool aha moments that connect to our own lives.
Definitely. Because let's face it, the science of aging can get pretty complicated.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So you pulled together research articles, news stories, even looked at the Wikipedia page.
Yeah, just to kind of get a good overall picture of what we know about this jellyfish.
Right, so we can really dive deep.
Exactly. Our mission here is to extract the most important knowledge about this jellyfish and see how it relates to the latest research on aging.
Perfect. So let's start with the basics. Most jellyfish, they have a pretty typical life cycle, right?
Yeah, pretty much. They're born, they mature, they reproduce, and then, like most living things,
Yeah.
their time comes.
They die.
Exactly. But our friend Turritopsis Dohrnii here, it kind of throws that whole playbook out the window.
Yeah, it does. It's the rebel of the jellyfish world, for sure.
It really is, because get this, when it faces tough times like injury, starvation, or even just getting old, it can actually revert back to its younger self.
Wait, what? Like Benjamin Button the jellyfish?
It's kind of like that. You know how a butterfly eventually, dies? But imagine if instead of dying, it could transform back into a caterpillar.
Oh, what?
And then start the whole cycle all over again?
So that's what this jellyfish does.
Yeah, basically. It's like hitting the reset button on its life.
So it's not just repairing damage. It's like starting over completely.
Exactly. And that's where it gets really fascinating. So this adult form, the one we typically picture when we think of jellyfish, it's called a medusa.
Okay.
This medusa can actually turn back into this stationary form called a polyp.
Huh.
And then that polyp can bud off and create new jellyfish that are genetically identical to the original one.
That's wild. Okay, so how does that even happen, like at a cellular level?
Right. So this is where we get into the nitty-gritty. This reversal is driven by a process called transdifferentiation.
Try saying that 3 times fast.
Transdifferentiation.
Yeah.
It's a mouthful.
It is. Okay, so what does transdifferentiation mean?
Okay, so imagine this. You have specialized cells in your body, right? Each one has a specific job. But in this jellyfish, these adult specialized cells can actually transform back into stem cells.
Stem cells, like the ones we hear about that could turn into any type of cell.
Exactly. So basically, the jellyfish is deconstructing its adult form and rebuilding a younger version of itself using these stem cells.
That's a biological time machine.
Right. And scientists have been studying this incredible ability since the 1990s.
Wow, so we've known about this for a while.
Yeah, one of the early investigators was a researcher named Ferdinando Boero. He did a lot of the pioneering work on this.
Cool. So it's like a cellular do-over?
Pretty much. And that's just the beginning.
Okay, so we've got this incredible transformation happening, but what's going on in its genes? Like, what's the secret code that allows this to happen?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And that's where scientists are really focusing their efforts. They're studying the jellyfish's genes to figure out how it pulls off this incredible feat.
Makes sense.
And there have been some amazing discoveries. One of the key findings is that certain gene categories become way more active when the jellyfish enters this cyst stage.
Cystis stage, yeah.
Yeah, it's this kind of in-between phase when it's transforming from the medusa back into a polyp.
Got it.
And they found this out by analyzing gene expression, looking at which genes are turned on and to what extent.
Okay, so what kind of genes are we talking about? What are the ones that are like super active during this cis stage?
Well, the ones that really stand out are genes involved in DNA repair.
DNA repair, so like fixing any damage to their genetic code.
Exactly. That's one piece of the puzzle.
Mm.
Then you've got genes responsible for DNA synthesis, which is basically creating new DNA.
Okay, so repair and rebuild. Makes sense.
Right. But here's the really fascinating part. The genes related to telomere maintenance are also highly active.
Telomeres. Those are the protective caps on the ends of our chromosomes, right?
You got it. And you know how they shorten as we age.
Yeah, that's one of the things that contributes to aging, right? Like the telomeres get shorter and our cells can't divide as well.
Exactly. And that's where the jellyfish seems to have a leg up. It
Yeah.
appears to be able to maintain and maybe even rebuild those telomeres during its reversal process.
So it's like turning back the aging clock at the chromosomal level.
Pretty much. And scientists think this involves increased activity of an enzyme called telomerase.
Telomerase. Yeah, I've heard of that. Isn't that the enzyme that's active in cancer cells too?
That's right. Telomerase is active in our stem cells and in cancer cells, allowing them to divide indefinitely.
So this is where it gets a little tricky, right? Because telomerase seems like it could be beneficial, but it's also linked to cancer.
Exactly. It's a double-edged sword. The key difference seems to be how the jellyfish regulates telomerase activity.
So it's using the same tool, but in a controlled way that doesn't lead to uncontrolled cell growth.
That seems to be the case. And this is a huge area of research because if we could figure out how the jellyfish does this, it could have massive implications for human health.
Yeah, that's huge.
And there's another study that supports this idea. It was published in PLOS 1, and it identified a whole bunch of genes that are super active during that cis stage we talked about.
Okay.
These genes are associated with things like aging lifespan, DNA repair, and even these processes called ubiquitin-related processes.
Ubiquitin-related processes.
Yeah, it's basically how cells get rid of old or damaged proteins. It's like cellular housekeeping.
Got it.
So the fact that all these genes are highly active during the reversal process suggests that the jellyfish is undergoing this really comprehensive cellular rejuvenation.
Like a total system reboot.
Exactly. It's not just one thing. It's a whole coordinated program of repair and regeneration.
Okay, so this all sounds super relevant to understanding aging in humans. But are we seeing any direct connections that could lead to new treatments for age-related diseases?
That's the big hope, right? And there are definitely some intriguing parallels. The fact that this PLOS-1 study found genes linked to aging and DNA repair that are super active in the jellyfish that suggest there might be shared mechanisms across species.
So what works for the jellyfish might work for us in some way.
Potentially. And there's another article in Science Direct that talks about how understanding this transdifferentiation process in the jellyfish could lead to new ways to rejuvenate human tissues.
Like tissues that have been damaged by things like heart disease or Alzheimer's.
Exactly. Imagine if we could stimulate our own cells to repair and regenerate more effectively.
That would be incredible. So are scientists looking at ways to like tap into our own regenerative abilities, maybe by figuring out how the jellyfish controls its telomeres or activates those DNA repair genes?
Yeah, that's the long-term goal. But as we talked about before with telomerase, the human system is a lot more complex.
Right.
Activating telomerase could theoretically help fight aging by extending cell lifespan, but there's a big risk of triggering uncontrolled cell growth, which leads to cancer.
Yeah, the cancer risk is a big hurdle.
It is. So any therapies based on these insights would need to be incredibly precise and targeted.
We don't want to create a new problem while trying to solve another one.
Right. So where do things stand right now in terms of research? Are there any labs out there actually trying to use jellyfish cells in human trials?
That would be pretty wild.
Well, as of right now, March 31st, 2025, there aren't any reported human trials using Turritopsis Dohrnii cells.
Okay.
And to be honest, that's probably not the most direct route anyway.
Really?
The main focus right now is on understanding the basic biological mechanisms at play in the jellyfish.
So really figuring out the nuts and bolts of how it works.
Exactly. There's a huge international effort to map its entire genome.
Its genome, like its entire genetic blueprint.
Yeah. And a study in BMC Genomics reported that they've identified over 23,000 genes in this tiny creature.
Wow, that's a lot of genes to sort through.
It is, but having that complete genetic map is crucial. It allows researchers to really dive deep into specific genes and figure out what they do.
So what have they found so far? Like, are there any particularly interesting discoveries coming out of this genome research?
Yeah, definitely. One of the coolest things is that certain gene categories are way more active in the reversed polyps, the younger versions.
Okay.
For example, genes involved in chromatin remodeling are super active.
Chromatin remodeling.
Yeah, think of it like this DNA is organized and packaged inside the cell, right?
Yeah.
And how it's packaged influences which genes are turned on and off.
Oh, I see.
So chromatin remodeling is basically changing that packaging to control gene expression.
Interesting.
And then there's another set of genes that are super active too, the matrix metalloproteinases.
Matrix metalloproteinase.
Yeah, they're enzymes that break down and rebuild the stuff around cells, like the scaffolding.
Okay, so kind of like construction workers.
Yeah, exactly. They're essential for restructuring tissues.
Got it.
And then, perhaps not surprisingly, genes related to embryonic development are more active too.
Oh, right, because it's essentially reverting back to a more youthful state.
Exactly. So these findings really point to a deliberate genetic program driving the whole rejuvenation process.
It's like the jellyfish has this built-in software for turning back time.
It really does.
Yeah.
But, as amazing as all this is, there are some big challenges when it comes to applying these discoveries to humans.
Right, like we're not jellyfish.
Exactly. For one thing, just growing these jellyfish in a lab and getting them to reverse their life cycle reliably is tricky.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's not as easy as it sounds. And then there's the even bigger challenge. Human biology is way more complex than a jellyfish is.
Yeah, I can imagine.
What works in a simple organism might not work the same way or could even be harmful in humans.
That makes sense.
So there's a lot more research to be done before we can start thinking about translating these discoveries into therapies.
Okay, so it's like we're looking at this amazing feat of nature, but we're still figuring out how to apply it to ourselves.
That's a great way to put it. And, one of the more unexpected things I came across in my research was this article in Popular Mechanics about how jellyfish collagen is being used in skincare products.
Wait, really? So they're using this immortal jellyfish to make anti-aging cream?
Well, not exactly. It's not from Turritopsis Dohrnii specifically, but it's collagen derived from jellyfish.
Okay.
And some companies are using it in their anti-aging products.
That's pretty wild. It seems kind of superficial, though, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not a magic bullet for immortality or anything.
Right.
But it does show that there's some commercial interest in the regenerative properties of jellyfish.
So it's like we're just scratching the surface of what these creatures might be able to teach us.
I think that's a great way to look at it.
Now, shifting gears a bit, are there any ethical concerns when it comes to studying and potentially manipulating a living organism like this?
That's a really important point. Ethical research practices are absolutely crucial. Scientists need to make sure their studies don't harm the jellyfish populations or their environment.
Yeah, we don't want to cause any unintended consequences.
Exactly. Sustainable collection and humane treatment in the lab are essential.
Right. We need to be responsible about this.
Absolutely. And there's another article I wanted to mention. It's a review in Cellular and Molecular Life Sciences.
Okay.
And it talks about how while these unusual model organisms like Turritopsis Dohrnii can teach us a lot about aging and regeneration,
Yeah.
translating those discoveries into human therapies is a long and complex process.
Oh, we've talked about that.
There's a lot we still don't know about how human cells work, and the potential risks of manipulating these processes are significant.
Like the risk of accidentally causing cancer.
Exactly. So the research needs to be very careful and rigorous.
Okay, so there's a lot of excitement, but also a lot of caution.
That's a good way to sum it up.
Now, one of the things that I found super helpful in the materials you provided was this comparison of key genes and processes in the jellyfish and their potential counterparts in humans.
Oh, yeah. That's a great way to see the connections.
Yeah, could we walk through a few of those just to kind of solidify what we've been talking about?
Sure. Let's start with telomerase activity. We talked about how it seems to be crucial for maintaining telomere length in the jellyfish during its reversal.
Right.
Well, the human gene that's analogous to the jellyfish telomerase gene is called TERT.
TERT, okay.
And TERT codes for the part of the telomerase enzyme that actually does the work of extending telomeres.
Got it.
So if we could somehow safely boost TERT activity in human cells, it could theoretically extend their lifespan.
But then there's that whole cancer risk again.
Exactly. It all comes back to that balance, finding a way to harness the benefits without triggering the negative side effects.
Okay, what about those DNA repair genes that are so active in the jellyfish? Do we have similar genes?
We do. We have a whole network of DNA repair pathways, and they involve tons of different genes, including some well-known ones like BRCA1 and BRCA2.
BRCA1 and BRCA2. Those are the genes that are linked to breast cancer risk, right?
Yeah, exactly. They're tumor suppressor genes, and they play a big role in repairing DNA damage.
So the idea is that if we could make our own DNA repair systems work better, we might be able to slow down aging and prevent some diseases.
That's the thinking.
Makes sense. Okay, and what about chromatin remodeling and those matrix metalloproteinases you mentioned? How do those connect to human biology?
Okay, so remember how we talked about chromatin remodeling being like rearranging the furniture in a room to change how things work?
Yeah.
Well, in humans, we have these enzymes called histone deacetylases, or HDACs,
HDCs.
and histone acetyltransferases, or HATs.
Okay.
And these enzymes do similar things to what the chromatin remodeling genes do in the jellyfish.
So they control gene expression by changing how DNA is packaged.
Exactly. So by studying how the jellyfish does this, we might learn how to better control gene expression in human cells and maybe even promote tissue regeneration.
Wow.
And as for the matrix metalloproteinases, or MMPs, they play a key role in breaking down and rebuilding the stuff around cells in the jellyfish.
Yeah, like the scaffolding.
Right? And guess what? We have MMPs in humans too.
We do.
Yep. And they're involved in things like wound healing and tissue repair.
So there's a direct parallel there.
There is. So you can see how studying the jellyfish could lead to new discoveries in these areas.
It's amazing how much overlap there is, even though we're so different.
It really is. And it highlights the interconnectedness of life on Earth. You know, we can learn a lot from studying even the simplest creatures.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, it's clear that this tiny Turritopsis Dohrnii jellyfish, with its seemingly immortal nature, has opened up this really fascinating window into the biology of aging and regeneration.
I agree. And it's not just about extending lifespan. It's about understanding the fundamental processes that govern how our cells age and how they might be able to repair themselves.
And while true human immortality might still be a long way off.
It probably is. But the research being done on this jellyfish is giving us valuable insights that could lead to new treatments for age-related diseases and maybe even help us live healthier, longer lives.
Exactly.
Exactly.
So as you process all this incredible information, here's something to ponder. What if the secrets to a longer, healthier life aren't hidden away in some high-tech lab, but are actually out there in the natural world, just waiting to be discovered?
I like that.
It really makes you wonder what other biological marvels are out there and what we can learn from them.
I think there's a whole universe of possibilities just waiting to be explored.
Well, on that note, I think we'll wrap up this deep dive. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and for taking us on this incredible journey.
It's been my pleasure.
And for all of you listening, thanks for joining us. And keep exploring the world around you. You never know what you might find.
That's the truth.
Until next time, stay curious.
And stay young at heart.
That's a good one.
Well, we can dream, right?
Absolutely. Until next time.
See you later.